Hello and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Mike Voinovich, a member of CMC's Board of Trustees and the Office Managing Partner at BDO. It's great to see everyone here today, a great vibrant turnout. Today's CMC Forum, Battelle CEO Louis van Thaer is sponsored by Deloitte, represented here today by many friends and associates. Won't you please help me thank them, and please help me welcome Jim Maloney, audit partner at Deloitte, to the stage to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, friends. Deloitte is proud to be a sponsor of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I am new to the Columbus area and am awed by the civic engagement and love for the community exemplified by organizations such as CMC. The conversations that happen here each week are important to our community and uniquely Columbus in the spirit of shared ideas and collaborative conversations. Today, we welcome a new talent to the region who takes on a leadership role at Battelle, one of the nation's finest and most respected research institutions. We know he is excited to join the chorus of those who help provide expertise, creativity, and direction to our community, and we look forward to learning more. Please welcome Battelle's President and CEO, Lou van Thaer. We also have another energetic community leader, our host for today's conversation, President and CEO of COSI, Frederic Bertley. Lou, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Jim. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and to be able to represent the men and women of Battelle and in my new community, Columbus, Ohio. My wife and I, Jennifer, have also been met with such grace and warmth that we've come into this community and met so many new people. We're so happy to be here. So I started at Battelle almost a year ago. I became official October 1st, and it's been an exciting year. As I've met many of you, I know most of you probably know Battelle by name, I continue to be surprised by how many people I've had lunch, dinners with, where the conversation always starts out, you know, my uncle, aunt, sister, somebody worked at Battelle. Great institution. The next comment is we have absolutely no idea what you do. So maybe we'll try to take off some of the veil, and we'll start a little bit of that today to talk about some of the things that we can talk about. We focus on solving those things that matter most, and the company's been doing it for a long time. Next year will be our 90th anniversary, where the institution got set together and put up in the first place, and it all started with the vision of Gordon Battelle. He was our founder. He was a Midwestern industrialist. He owned factories in this area, and every time they had technical problems, they had trouble solving them back in those days. This is in the mid-20s. So when he died, he left in his will a little over $1 million to set up an institute. And that institute would basically take scientific discoveries and technological advances and conform them to the betterment of society. And that's what Battelle has tried to do ever since then. His mother passed away a few years later and made that about a $3 million bequest. And today that's grown to $5 billion annual sales that Battelle does across the world and across our country. And very happy, if some of you noticed the newspapers lately, we recently won, which I think is our biggest program ever. We will now be managing with some partners, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and we're really proud of our team for being able to win that. So we're early in our work, and our team's working very hard, but Battelle's growing again, and we're very excited by that. And when Gordon Battelle set us up, he wanted us to be wildly successful. So as we made money and were successful, we could both invest in the business to advance technology even further, but also give back to the local community and society. And the company continues to do that today. I believe that mission is alive and well, and I hope that Gordon will be proud of us today when he looks at the things that we do. And those include things like building armored vehicles that keep our armed forces safe. Things that look like pickup trucks, but when you get up close, you find they're very different. And our folks can travel around various parts of the world and be protected. We do those in the west side of Columbus. We work with the organizations in the government, and our scientists are working on prevention of pandemics, including Ebola and Zika viruses. We actually help build and design new viruses that can be used to combat new diseases that are popping up. We are an organization building and operating the world's first continental scale ecological observatory network that will give scientists around the world a huge access of data for looking and studying climate change and what's happening across the entire U.S. continent and its territories around the world. And we're helping create smart cities while working to fortify the Internet of Things from malicious attacks. We're an organization that manages 6, and with Los Alamos soon 7 national laboratories that do a lot of the basic research that happens in this country today, things like particle accelerators and very large research projects sponsored by our government. In short, we're staying relevant by continuing to advance, continuing to always adjust to where we see the future going, and working on the biggest challenges. Today, when we say solving what matters most, for us that means areas of national security, healthcare, and environment and infrastructure. That's the science part of our mission. And as an engineer myself, it's a part that I'm always very excited about. But the other part of our mission that's equally exciting is how we take and give back to our community. At Battelle, it's truly part of our day job, being one of the largest nonprofits, research organizations in the world. So we do this through primarily STEM education, and many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with some of the things that we do here locally. With OSU, we run the metro schools that have been around since 2006. Today, there are 3 schools that have 1,200 students, and we graduate everyone from high school every year, and almost all go to college each year out of the same demographics that our public schools are dealing with. On a nationwide level, we expect we'll touch about 200,000 kids this year with programs that Battelle's involved with for STEM, and 89,000 just in Ohio and Tennessee. We love science. We want to help our new generation have access and see so they can make their own decisions on what they want to do with their lives and their careers. We also love those who support science. So we're strong supporters of organizations like COSI and other organizations that celebrate science, technology, engineering, and math. And with the help, and we help our community in other ways, places like the Community Shelter Board, American Heart Association, the Columbus Zoo, and the Franklin Park Conservatory. I know I can speak for all the men and women of Battelle, and we have a few tables of some of our leaders here today, that we are always committed to being good citizens in the places that we work and live. So with that, Frederic, I think you have some questions.
Lou, may I call you Lou?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you can call me Dr. Bertley.
Okay.
Before I get to questions, I want to thank Jane Scott, and really, I don't get to come to every Wednesday, but I do come, and many people from our team, COSI, come. Just an amazing lecture series. Two, I want to shout out my team. I'm a little nervous because last time I spoke, they were at the back, but I know they want to throw stuff at me, so they're closer range, so I'm a little worried about that.
Should I back up?
And you should probably back up. And 3, I always want to thank him when I see him. My predecessor, Dr. David Chesbrough, thank you for leaving COSI in such good shape. So yeah, lots of questions, but I'll begin with a warning label. So first of all, thank you for being the new guy on the block. It's no longer me. But 2, CMC, they ask you to come do a presentation, and you're supposed to do 1 presentation. So this is my 3rd time, so either I'm doing really, really bad each time, and I'm able to make up, or just a cautionary tale. All right, but seriously, we're going to get into Battelle. But I'm always interested in the arc of successful people's career. So I know you're from Kansas, but walk us through, how you became an engineer. I know you were at the prestigious Bell Labs, but walk us through your trajectory to getting to Battelle, which is, again, the world's largest, best nonprofit research institution in the world. So how'd you get? What's your career?
So you can never plot these things out. If you'd have told me 30 years ago where I'd be today, I thought you were crazy. But I grew up in a blue-collar area in Kansas. It's kind of the classic middle-class success story, and it's just been very lucky my whole life. My grandfather was actually from Ohio. My father was born in Ohio. My grandfather got through the sixth grade. My dad made it through high school. I was the first to go to college and worked a lot of minimum wage jobs and took a lot of student loans to go to Kansas State, where back in those days it was $3,000 a year, which seemed crushing. I was very fortunate at the end of that to get offered a job at Bell Labs, and a lot of you don't have enough gray hair maybe to know what Bell Labs was, but it was kind of Google times 10. A company that came from Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone, and went 110 years of creating a patent every day. it was an amazing environment for a young engineer to walk into. I got to meet Nobel laureates, people who wrote the books that I studied in college, and it was just a fascinating place to learn. So through there, I eventually went into management. About halfway through this, Bell Labs got our division that was doing the work for the government. I'd become head of engineering by then. Actually got bought by General Dynamics. They wanted to expand their business and add more technology. So with General Dynamics, suddenly I started learning about business instead of just technology, and it was a very lucky stroke for me that it kind of helped round myself out in my experiences. So that was my first career. I did it for 30 years. And then I'd been an officer of GD for about 10 years, running a big division there, and decided, you know, I can't see doing this another 15 years. I figured I kind of had that done before I wanted, you know, maybe not work 80 hours a week. And so I went to Leidos, helped SAIC split into 2 companies and ran part of that company for a couple of years. Had a good time there, learned a lot, and then went to, for my first CEO job, to run one of the bigger logistics companies that works around the world for the Department of Defense called DynCorp, owned by private equity, one of Donald Trump's buddies, so it was a learning experience. And it's also, you know, it was a company that did very important work, but you had to do hard things. I actually had 3 of my employees, including my leader, actually killed by an IED on day 9. So it was a very quick, baptism by fire. But I think all those things help around you, and it is true. Those things that don't kill you do make you stronger. So I got a call maybe about 1.5 years, a little bit longer ago, from a couple board members here and a search firm asking if I might be interested in coming to lead Battelle. And for me, as I learned more about it, I was familiar with Battelle from 25 years ago. It always had a great reputation. I didn't know it was a nonprofit back in those days, and I started researching, learning a little bit more, learning more about Columbus. Columbus is a well-kept secret around most of the country, and just how fantastic it was here. I decided this would be a great kind of final act, if the board's willing to put up with me that long, to really come back and kind of end like I started, back with a research organization, to be able to bring some of the skills that I've been lucky enough to gain over the years and help a bunch of fantastic people just be successful and continue to make a difference in the world.
Wow, fantastic. I mean, first of all, Gordon Battelle, I'm sure, is smiling, so that's great. Two, you mentioned throughout, you know, you were lucky here, you were lucky there, and you know, that may be true, but Louis Pasteur said it best, you know, chance favors the prepared mind. And so for the younger folks in here, you know, luck sometimes has something to do with it, but you got to be ready, you got to work hard, and clearly you're testimony to that. All right, so let's jump into Battelle. It's the largest nonprofit research institution in the world, and I mean, the list of inventions and contributions to science and technology that you all have done is unbelievable. How do you compete as a nonprofit with some of the biggest, best funded institutions around the world and successfully stay at the top?
Yeah, and that's the big challenge for the company. We're a very unique nonprofit. We don't do fundraising. We don't take donations. We basically compete and win every penny we get. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure we have a business structure to match our technology prowess. We have to make sure we're always evolving our technology and not staying in the same place. So you probably read in the newspaper some difficult things we've had to do in the first year, but it was really about, you know, how do we make the company more nimble? Fewer layers to get through to make decisions so we can move at the speed that our customers and the technology is changing at. How do we make sure that our costs are within an affordable range? My head of communications puts it very well. You know, Prada or Chanel can go out and sell a purse for, you know, 50 times the cost or maybe 100 times the cost because they can market brands. Pretty hard to do that selling to the U.S. government. You might get a 10% advantage. So if you're not in a range where you can compete, that's kind of what you have to look at. And above all, you want to differentiate. You don't just want to sell. You don't want to be one of the gang. You want to take these incredibly bright people we're so lucky to have in the organization and really challenge and take advantage of their innovations so that we can sell something that competitors just don't have. And one of our strategies we put forward as we went through our restructuring about 6 months ago was really to take our R&D investment up by 5 times over the next 3 to 5 years. And we're on track to do that. And I think when you take that amount of additional investment plus the talent we have in the organization, it's going to be really fun to watch and see what happens.
Amazing. So then how do you pick the projects for that great talent to work on? Like, I mean, it's almost like you guys get that fastball thrown to you and you knock it out the park all the time. How do you know where to put your energies? Yeah, well, this is where our leadership team spends most of their time, is thinking about how we build the strategy. And we're still refining that. We've really been working that
Battelle's probably been a little bit tougher than at other places I've been at, because at other places you'll find a dozen things going on, and maybe A and B slot can fit together in a way that you hadn't looked at it before. At Battelle, there are so many things, and every cubbyhole you look into. In fact, if I ever have a down day, I just go to the cafeteria and I sit down with the group and I say, what's happening, what's cool? And there's always amazing things going on with the people at Battelle. So I think for us, we're going a little bit slower to figure out where we focus in on, but we've looked at places that, that have big problems, that need big solutions, like healthcare, like infrastructure, energy, some of those places that we talked about. And then we're trying to make sure we're focusing our investments, and we're trying to learn from commercial businesses, primarily startup businesses, of how to move quickly, how to do early seed funding and fail fast. Nobody ever wants to fail, but you want to get to decisions on which things are working and which things aren't. And more importantly, you want to be able to turn on a dime. You know, if you look at most successful companies, a Facebook or a Google, none of them are doing what they actually started out to do. They all started some other way, but the team could evolve as they saw markets, as they started to get success in other areas and evolve. And we're trying to build that same culture into Battelle. Basically, we want to have an affinity for action.
Sure. No, fantastic. I mean, one of the greatest engineers in this country, Dean Kamen, you all know him from the invention of the Segway, but he has over 450 patents. And at his company called DECA in New Hampshire, on the wall it says, fail fast, fail often. And it sounds like you practice that too, which is
And I know Dean, I worked with First a lot, which is his charity that does the robotics competitions, another great organization.
Very cool. Good. All right. So, you know, there's so many tough and interesting directions I want to go to regarding the science and research. In 2001, the National Academy of Engineers came up with these things called grand challenges. These are 14 grand challenges that if we solve them, we'll make the world a better place. Everything from clean water to solar energy to cyberspace, cybersecurity, nitrogen cycle, you know, armed, I mean, you name it. Thinking about all those amazing things and where your company's going now, what do you think the next cool things are happening on the horizon related to those kind of 14 grand challenges?
Yeah, so I think, and again, at Battelle, what we're trying to do, again, is focus down on where we're really strong. And for us, that's material science, biology, and chemistry. And then we're trying to bring digital capabilities into those so we can speed up the learning process and take advantage of modern things. You know, there's a couple things going on today that are just fantastic. If you look at what we're starting to do with machine learning, you know, machines can read x-rays now of certain types of cancer better than trained radiologists can. So we can focus on other things. We can let machines start to do some of these things. And it's because our computing power has gotten strong enough. So people that write code, that do machine learning, data analytics, and build algorithms is a really hot area now. And today, applying that to cybersecurity is one of the hottest places. Is, you know, 15, 20 years ago, I was in the cybersecurity business. Nobody called it that then. Everything that happened behind very closed doors with lots of secret and top secret covers on top. Now it shows up in the newspaper every day, and suddenly your bank account's gone, or your fingerprints are in China. And it's just a way of life that we're learning to deal with. When I look at what's happening in biology today, particularly life sciences, and when you look at what's happening with immunotherapies and with synthetic biology, I think we are. You know, I started my career in the early 80s, and it was the beginning of a renaissance in electronics. We'd had the transistor around for a couple decades by then. We were just starting to learn how to do integrated circuits, and we've all seen the explosions. You know, all of us in our pocket have a supercomputer that is more powerful than the supercomputers in rooms this size back in those days. I think we're at that same point today in the advanced biologies. I think we're finally getting machines big enough that can simulate some of these complex structures of nature we've never been able to before. And I believe we're just at the tip of figuring out how to use our own DNA and our own genomes to help cure our own diseases, to actually have personalized medicines, to solve a lot of problems that have dogged humanity for a long time. And of course, with those things, with every good thing, always comes somebody, you know, some jerk that wants to do the opposite and destroy humanity with it, and the defenses that go with all these technologies. So these are areas that we're doing a lot of focus on today, and I think if we look back 10 or 15 years from now, we're going to see a very different world in those areas than history has shown us up to this point.
Sure. So diving in on that kind of personalized medicine, and you know, imagine taking a finger stick, or I don't have any here, but if you have here, a piece of hair, getting your DNA, and then, you know, sequencing that and tailoring a series of medications or treatments for you in the rest of your life that specifically and only work appropriately for you. How close are we to that?
So it's starting to happen already. Some of you have read the story of Jimmy Carter, our former president. He had stage 4 brain cancer. he's cured. He's 90 years old. So today, it doesn't work for everybody, and it only works for certain things, but we're starting, again, I think we're just at the very beginning. And some of the things Battelle is doing, I think will make a lot of difference in these areas. You know, one of the things we've done that we actually have rolled into the crime labs in Ohio is our engineers over the last 5 or 6 years have actually invented new ways to break a genome DNA strand down into very small pairs and then parallel process them so they can do them much quicker, so we don't have the multi-year backups of rate kits and all the evidence issues. But the same way of being able to process those sequences faster also speeds up discovery in the and when we're building new formulas and looking at new DNA and new compounds, basically, to apply to medicines. So I think we're going to see an exponential. We can do a little bit of this today for certain diseases with certain types of people, and I think we're at the beginning of an exponential curve that we will all see and feel in most of our lifetimes.
Great. One of the other burgeoning fields is neuroscience, and you guys are, again, just cracking that wide open. I mean, I don't know details I want you to share, but you have this one patient who I believe was a lacrosse athlete in college and went on a trip or something happened and got paralyzed from the shoulders down. And it's my understanding, and walk us through it, that you've taken an individual who's paralyzed from the shoulder down, literally that would have been his fate for the rest of his life, and figured out a kind of prosthetic to put on their arm, and you'll walk us through it, tethered to their brain, that now this person has incredible motility. Why don't you walk us through, first of all, how did you think about doing that? How did you meet this young man? And then what you can share that's not IP protected.
So this all happened before my time, so my predecessors get all the credit. But you know, we had been doing work on brain interface, to how you can take signals off the brain and work on them, and had done research for a number of years, had actually gotten FDA approval, and then there was a young man who was in college, had this terrible accident, and suddenly, you know, he had no movement from his neck down. You know, terrible way to go through the rest of your life. So we were actually able to put an implant in his head, and you go on our website and you can actually see a video of this, and he's got an implant that you connect a cord to his head, and he thinks now, and we've actually built algorithms in a computer that can decode his thoughts, and then we put a sleeve on his arm, and the sleeve has little metal probes on it, and by sending electrical signals into those probes, we stimulate the muscles. He can now drink, he can drink from a glass, he can brush his teeth, he can do things again. He can reanimate his arm by his own thoughts.
Now, he's even driving a car, I believe, right?
I don't think he's driving a car yet, but he's playing a Wii guitar.
Sorry, it was a driverless car. He's in the passenger.
Yeah. He's playing a Wii guitar though now. And again, it's not perfect yet. It's still early research. We've gotten approval to do 4 more patients, and we're actually starting to look for government funding now to help speed that along. But again, we think this is, again, very early research of something that could be remarkably impactful to people that are impacted by Alzheimer's, strokes, accidents, these kind of diseases, soldiers who have issues. And we're to the point now, too, where 5, 6 years ago when this all started, you know, the computer sat on a desk, and we're down, you know, we're getting down to about a size now that you can basically make more of these things mobile. So again, it's the beginning. Right now you have to have an implant put into your brain. Most people probably aren't going to want to do that. So there's more research to figure out how to take those signals off the brain or from somewhere else that isn't quite as evasive, but that makes the signal smaller, so we have another signal-to-noise problem to solve, and that's what engineers and scientists do. So we have teams that are publishing dozens of papers every year on this work and getting rave reviews, and it's really exciting, and the young man who's doing it, he's just a remarkable young man. I mean, his courage and his excitement around continuing to do this, to give him back some control of his life, was really inspiring.
No, fantastic, fantastic. Before we shift into another area, so you mentioned, you know, writing algorithms, and, you know, Google kind of owns the writing, or now Facebook, the writing of algorithms. Talk to us about how connected is your world? Do you all, I mean, when you talk about, you know, big data and all this access to information out there, obviously, the more information you have, the better you can move things downfield. Do you all have collaborations with these big guns like Google and Facebook to share information? Does some of that happen? You know?
Yeah, we do some, and quite frankly, we do a lot of these through the national laboratories. You've got billions of dollars of government research money going into these labs, and they're doing things like bringing the Million Veteran database down to Oak Ridge into what is now, we just turned on the fastest supercomputer in the world about a month ago. Now we have the processing power. We're starting to look at what can we learn from the history of all these veterans in this database. What can we learn from Medicaid and Medicare data, both to make the systems more efficient, but also to speed the learning of how we put new drugs in place. Can we learn things so we can skip more preclinical testing, so we can start to skip steps and get new medicines and new solutions to people quicker? So, you know, we do some work with all these companies in various forms. A lot of them like to go on their own and kind of like to stay behind the hidden doors. We tend to stay behind the hidden doors for the classified work that we do, which is part of our work, but we tend to be much more open about the rest of it.
Great. Great. I want to pivot now to, you mentioned some of your philanthropic work and the Metro STEM schools, of course, COSI Science Festival, thank you again. We'll talk about that in a minute. Some stuff you do with the zoo, et cetera. One of the reasons why I moved to the city is this thing called the Columbus Way and this collaborative spirit. Let's drill down and really talk about, there is a real problem filling the pipelines. Our team went to NetJets yesterday. This morning we spoke to another company. We're always hearing the same thing. Lots of job openings, you know, but there's this workforce development gap. Great on the metro schools you're helping, great on schools like KIPP, but at the end of the day, the public school system in this great city, just like many other cities, so this is not a Columbus issue, it's a national issue, is struggling to educate our masses, one, and two, educate them so that they're effective enough to either walk in with a 2-year community degree or get an engineering or, you know, a 4-year degree or even beyond. How can we really crack that nut? And where do you position Battelle in that space? Yeah,
so again, and I don't know our school system, I'm new to town, but I do think, let me start with the Columbus Way, because I think I had not heard of that coming here, and I've heard the word said, and you're like, okay, we'll put it on a bumper sticker and we'll put it on the back of our car, that's great. I've been involved in economic development organizations and other places. You know, when you look at what the Columbus Partnership has put together and done over the last 10 years to where the companies in town actually come together to do good things for the community, to attract new companies to the community, bring more resources in. I've never seen anything like it as effective as what I see here, and I think it's made a huge difference. If you look at, you know, why Columbus maybe outgrew Indianapolis or other Midwestern towns, or Columbus proper is bigger than Washington, D.C. now. I didn't know that, most people don't. So I think the growth that's happened here has happened because we've learned to work together better. And I don't know yet, or I don't have a feeling for how that works into the school system and their challenges. So one of the things we're trying to do is we're happy to work with the school system any way we can, but we also want to take that 1,200 kids that's being educated, and Amy Kennedy, who runs our philanthropic work and our education, you know, we want to make that go up by 5 or 6 over the next 10 years. So we're starting already to look for our next school. We have resources set aside. And the thing that I think makes things like Metro work is there was Battelle for Kids, and there was research that went on for decades of learning of what teaching methods work and which ones don't. And I love it when I go to the Metro school. You know, these little kids come up to me, they look me in the eye, they walk me around, they tell me about their school values. It's a remarkable thing. And then when you look, what they do is you have to get an A to get out of a course. And if you're struggling, they put the resources on you then. Don't wait till you're failing and then put the resources, which I think is a more traditional method. So I think we have learned things. And the Metro School is one of my favorite examples because it's been running now since 2006. We've got kids that are popping out through the college system on a regular basis. We see them going into successful careers. You know, I know there's been a lot of STEM school and charter school scandals of what works and what doesn't and all these things. And I think we've actually got metrics that show that this really works well. And obviously it was all set up and running long before I got here. So I think there's lessons learned that the public school could take advantage of. And I think we could help in any way we can. I also think in the community, the way Battelle can help, one is make those kind of opportunities available. But the other piece is, and I think, Frederic, this is what we'll try to do with COSI and others, is how do you make sure—
You're on record right now.
That's right. You know, how do you make sure that every kid in this city, Central Ohio, expand it, gets the opportunity to see and understand what STEM is. You know, talking about Dean Kamen, Dean has a great saying, you know, is your future going to be bounce, bounce, shoot, or is it going to be, you know, actually things that are driving the economy and driving the world and learning the skill sets that make those things happen? And I think that's true. I think we have to show that even if you are unfortunate and you come from a difficult environment or you come from an economically challenged environment, if we can at least help you understand that science and math are important and they're reachable and there are resources here, it's a way out. And for me, As I said, I was the first in my family to go to college. My family's changed forever. My kids never dreamed of not going to college growing up. I was so fortunate and got an opportunity that had not happened in my family before. My brother and sister did not do the same, and growing up, all I had to do is go back and visit them, and even when my kids were 5, they'd start to ask me, well, why do we live like this and they live like this? And I think education is a great liberator. It's the thing that can make a difference to help people change their lives and get out of a tough situation. So the more we can give people exposure, the more we can get kids excited that, you're not a nerd if you learn how to code, or if you learn science, you'll be the boss someday. The more of that we can do, I think can help.
No,
clearly, there's big problems that aren't going to be solved simply.
Well, and I applaud you for that, and thank you for Battelle's commitment to that. I mean, there are examples here in Columbus, and you mentioned some, and around the country. So I think one of the big missing links is for the governments to see these, because we can't go to scale. Battelle can't go to scale and solve the school problem for everybody. AEP can't do it, Nationwide can't do it, but the governments play a big role. So it's continuing to get the government support to see, hey, there's some models that work, and how do we shift funds there instead of down the drain. I got kind of 1.5 more questions before we open up to you, because we do want to have some questions from you all. So in a previous life, we had an exhibition called 101 Inventions That Changed the World. Everything from of course, the television, the telegraph, the telephone, obviously the computer, penicillin. I mean, there are these basically 101 inventions that did an order of magnitude jump in the capacity for humans to live more comfortable lives. Number one, can anybody guess what the number one, it wasn't really an invention, but discovery was that changed the world? Any guesses? Who said that? Absolutely, fire. It's amazing. Just the actual capacity, because we didn't discover fire, it's a natural thing, but the capacity to harness it absolutely was the biggest game changer for humanity. All right, so with that, as an expert engineer heading up one of the greatest invention and discovery institutions in the world, what would you predict? I mean, if we think of like now the computer and the internet and digital technology, what's that next big thing that's going to change the world, in your opinion?
That's a great question. The one that's always fascinated me is there's been a little bit of very early play work done on actually storing information in DNA sequences.
Yeah, sure.
And we've always talked about how brains work and how efficient they are. I think we might see something in our lifetimes where we actually learn how to harness biology to actually store all the information we've been doing in silicon and gallium for the last 50 or 60 years. And if you do that, things get immensely smaller, they get faster, they get much simpler. To actually, as a user, they get much simpler. And that would change the game again. I think that would be another step function increase to the types of applications and the types of things we could advance. And Moore's Law is starting to run out of steam. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if we get a new technology that keeps us on that path or not. But if I had to guess, that'd be one that I've seen a few hints of that might be possible.
And that's interesting. There's a lot of work. I mean, there's even a lot of kind of physical structures being built by DNA. They're talking about actually using DNA as literally building protein. But say more on that, because if DNA is something that we all know we have in our blood and it's different between us, but one of the phenotypes of DNA, or characteristics of DNA, is that it does mutate. So if DNA is going to be possibly a medium to store information safely, how do you manage safeguarding from you storing your typical essay that now we do Control-S on Word, and now you're using some DNA software to do it, but the DNA will mutate on your own, you can't control that. So that's an interesting duality to me.
Yeah, listen, all technologies can be used for good and can be used for evil, right? Fire can be used to warm yourself, it can be used to burn the guy next door, and I think we've seen that with every technology that's happened along the way, and we continue to see it now. In fact, one of the things that scare us the most today, and Battelle's very involved with this, you can actually develop your own DNA sequence, Frederic. You can go home and whittle something up in your mind, and you can go on the internet, put that sequence in, and a manufacturer will produce that DNA for you. They'll use a CRISPR-9 synthetic biology manufacturing tool that sits about the size of a trunk of a car, and they will produce that, and they will send you a test tube with that DNA in it. So how do you make sure that it's not the next smallpox? That it's not something bad. So Battelle's starting to look,
even on its own, not even a nefarious person behind it.
Either way, right? Yeah. So one of the things Battelle's doing today is because we've spent the last 50 years looking at chemical agents and biological agents, and when you hear about these things in Syria or all these bad places where maybe something happens on a park bench, you can probably guess that somewhere in our basement there's a sample of one of those things coming in, and we have scientists and engineers that are doing analysis to understand it and help develop strategies of how we would combat it if we ever had to. So I think just like, again, any new technologies that come out will have to have some kind of safety security. When we first invented the internet, we didn't worry about security at all. We got away with it for about 10 years. Now we're having a few issues, and my guess is, we might see those same trends go again.
Sure. No, fair enough. And that's why, you've all heard the term STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, and many of you heard the term STEAM, science, technology, arts, engineering, math. And I think that's critical because, as you mentioned, an invention or a technology can be used for good or bad, but it's about the person behind. And that's why, whether you're a scientist or an engineer, this connection with the arts is critical because it's that culture that you learn that keeps us human and has us on the right track. So I applaud you for making that point.
Plus, I would add that I think engineers are getting better at learning this in college. When I went to college, it was not a focus of how we actually present our ideas or explain them to other human beings. In fact, I can say it because I'm an engineer, but my favorite engineering joke always was, do you know how you can tell an introvert from an extrovert engineer? The extrovert engineer looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. So I think...
Unfortunately, so true.
So I think we are rounding out our engineers and scientists better in universities today, but also I think as we add that art component, so we also learn how to convey our ideas.
Sure.
And we learn how to combine and work together in teams. I think there's real value in that.
Oh, sure. Great. I think we have some time for some questions. I'd like you to go to the microphone. There's one over there. State your name, where you're from. Please make sure you know that a question ends in a question mark. And there are going to be a lot of questions, so we'd ask that you keep your questions to a reasonable length of time. Thanks so much.
Hi, I'm Trip Lazarus, and this is a very short question, and in view of the very many exciting things that you're talking about, this is maybe a little more mundane, but I'm very curious about what you're doing in the infrastructure space and in the energy space.
Yeah, so, energy we're doing a little less than we used to, but we're still involved with a number of carbon sequestration programs that are looking at taking basically the emissions from natural gas plants or coal plants and putting them back into the earth so they don't go into the atmosphere. We're looking at some recovery of rare earth metals. Because in coal ash, there are some rare earth metals that you can recover. It's not very cost effective yet, but as China has cornered more of those markets around the world and the United States needs those, that's an important area that we're continuing to focus on. On infrastructure, we're working with smart cities. We are looking at connected vehicles and how you can help trains as autonomy comes into place. We're helping work on some of the technologies of how you manage that structure and how you build out the data infrastructures that'll let different types of sensors and vehicles work with each other. So again, early in those areas, but like that, the ecology project I mentioned, that's in about 85 sites. My numbers will be off a little bit, with thousands of sensors and sophisticated sensors all over the world, and we're linking these back together along with physical samples, and we're making them available through the National Science Foundation to all scientists who want to sign up and go onto their website. So that we'll actually have factual data from sensors that will be in place for decades that will allow climatologists and scientists to take that big data set and actually manage it, work with it, and Battelle is all about science and factual science, so we're independent. There's no fake news, there's no agendas that we're trying to push, and I think that's one of the values that we bring as an organization.
Great.
Jolene Molatoris Associates. I'm a transportation consultant. I want to focus on women engineers. Mm-hmm. Your STEM program, all that's going on in the schools is just extraordinary. We have data that shows women engineers are not progressing once they get into the corporate or business environment. And I'm interested to know what Battelle's strategies are to nurture and get the best from everyone.
Yeah, I think that's, in fact, my daughter, who's now a doctor, is also an engineer. But this is an area across the board where I think both for diversity and women engineers, we still have more work to do. And coming into Battelle, I think we're a little less diverse here than in places I've been before, and we're starting to lay out strategies. We have an advantage that we run a very big internship program every year. We typically bring about 80 to 120 people in. So we're starting to look at that base to start bringing people in. And then we're really going to be looking at career development and mentorship programs, and how do we make sure eventually that we can make, which I think is an important nationwide issue, how do we make sure that our engineering workforces and science workforces look like the demographics of the places they come from?
No, that's great, and we have a program at COSI called The Color of Science, which is to also identify the current female and diverse engineers and scientists out there, because, you know, seeing somebody that looks like you is worth 1,000 words. I mean, if you have an internship program, but there's no women on staff, you know, it's tricky. So identifying the ones you do have, which you do have, is important as well. Sir.
Hi, good morning. My name is John Torres with the Ohio Corn and Wheat Growers Association. I think it's very exciting to hear the possibilities that science allows us to have. I think the public relies on institutions like Battelle and universities like Ohio State to be the leaders in science. However, we live in a society today where people want to believe their own science as if they could own their own science. You know, this morning's news was rampant about issues with biotechnology. We talk about things like vaccines and all sorts of things. How do we bring rational discussion back to the science discussion around the kitchen tables across America?
So I come to Battelle, right? Come to Battelle. No, I think, you know, we are, as our society gets more divided, and even our news publications and others seem to, very few of them seem to be balanced. They seem to come at it from one side or the other. I think institutions like Battelle, and we're not the only one, but I think using the independent institutions to make sure we're getting the real science. You know, Battelle's been involved with tobacco for years. It's not because we're pro-tobacco, it's because we want to make sure as the government's doing regulation, they have the real science and the actual facts of what the impacts are and how it actually works. I think today you have to be very careful of the news that we get and make sure that our science is really science. And, you know, there are people with agendas, and there always have been, but it's something that I think we should all be aware of, and we should all make sure we're trying to separate the headlines from what's actually happening in the news story.
I mean, absolutely. I think, you know, I want to jump in here. I applaud you for that question. You know, this great nation is becoming more and more science illiterate. NSF has studied it, Yale, U.gov, you name it, Pew. There's all these studies that says our great American institutions, it's not America, Europe, and Canada, are becoming more and more science illiterate, and it's a problem. It's such a problem that for some reason when your car breaks down, it's clear to you that you go to an auto mechanic. If you need to paint your house, you hire a painter. If your toilet breaks, you hire a plumber, et cetera, et cetera. But if you want to know about vaccines, it's okay to go to Jenna McCarthy or Oprah Winfrey and not a vaccine scientist. It's this bizarre thing, but it's a reality that's happening. And unfortunately, I'm not knocking Oprah or them, but they have a following. And to the layperson who is not science literate, hey, if Oprah says vaccines are bad, I'm blindly going to decide that's true. And so it's a combination of science literacy and then just making sure we are going to our experts who are experts. They're not, you know, non-experts, they're experts. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, and science tends to be complicated, so it's hard to do in 120 characters.
That's right. Well said. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Amanda Sage, and I'm with the Metropolitan Club, and I'm not really asking a question, but Dr. Bertley, you said you were going to talk about the Science Festival, and you didn't, so now you're on.
Oh, fair enough. I did not plant that, but thank you very much. Hold on a second. Someone said I always come to talk with props, and this is true, so tis my today's prop. So I don't know how many of y'all know this. We launched a science festival. The idea of a science festival, it's a 4-day science extravaganza. The first 3 days take science out of COSI into the community in roughly a 40 to 50 mile radius. We'll be working with cities throughout Franklin County. And we launched the news on May 22nd. The group that stepped up to be the lead funder for the Science Festival is Battelle. And I'm going to just out you there. And while there's always room for more, so feel free to pull out your checkbooks, I want to say they set the bar high with a donation of $850,000 over 3 years. So almost $1 million to make the community more science literate and excited around science. So with that, thank you again. And so we did this big launch. The fourth day, by the way, the first 3 days are around the city, roughly about 50, 55 events or so. The last day is at COSI and around COSI, and it's called the Science Carnival. We're going to have about 200 different exhibitors, everything from for-profits, nonprofits, engineers, scientists, engineers looking at other shoes, you name it. Everybody's going to be there, but it's really about getting people excited about science. It's not to make everybody a scientist or an engineer. It's to make everybody comfortable understanding science and engineering. And so we did this great big launch. Of course, Lou came. He was one of the guest speakers because he gave that very hefty check. And we do things big style. In fact, the Science Festival team is there. Please raise your hand, the Science Festival team. Right? These are the people that helped put it on. We put on this great show at the Peninsula in front of COSI, and one of the things is we wanted to have, you know, the good Lou on there, and the mayors. We had 10 mayors, so not just mayor from the city of Columbus, but 9 other cities. Their mayors were represented, and we did this whole big science experiment. Well, you know, we're kind of messy at COSI. And so one of the big experiments was to create this thing called elephant toothpaste, and it makes a big mess. Long story short, I was on stage with this great man and Mayor Andy Ginther. I took off my suit jacket, put it on the right. They didn't pay attention to my instructions. They put their suit jackets on the left. We did this whole big experiment.
I think I know what this is.
And the good Lou Von Thayer's very expensive suit jacket got horribly stained. He wouldn't, but he's a man of class. He wouldn't allow us to replace it. So we framed it, put it in here, and we have a quote that says, "Name the greatest of all inventors, the accident," from Mark Twain. So we present this back to you.
That's a lot more interesting than my jacket was before.
So we present this back to you, but we really want to thank you again for Battelle's commitment to taking science to the people where they live, learn, and lounge. The moral of the story is not give COSI $850,000 and you get a stained jacket. That's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is collaboratively through the Columbus Way, we can all make a difference and really help fill that pipeline for workforce development, and really beyond that, make society a better place. And so with that, we have time for one more question. You get the last question, sir.
Awesome.
And then I'll say a closing remark.
Thanks, guys. My name is Trevor Thomas. I'm here from S4 Consulting. So, Lou, earlier you mentioned how Battelle wanted to increase their investment in R&D 5 times over the next few years. And you talked a little bit about what you've learned from startups, how to fail fast. I want you to talk a little bit more about what else you've learned from startups, about how to compete right now.
Yeah, well, I think, so first off, startups could work on speed. And startups work on customer feedback. And some of you probably know, I've done a lot of lessons learned, a lot of reading about Battelle Ventures. Because we actually tried to do this about 10 years ago. And through about a decade, most of that investment was written off. And I think we learned the hard way that if you're gonna run like a startup, you really have to run like a startup. You can't try to do it with your current bureaucracy. You can't do it with somebody who retired from a venture fund but didn't put their own money in. A lot of the lessons learned the startup community uses. So I think the other thing that I've learned over time as well, and I've studied and I've been traveling around talking to some of my peers, a lot of the companies like Battelle that creates great companies, the inventors get very little for it. If you look at SRI, is one a spin out of Stanford, has done this very well. They've created $3 billion industries in the last decade, and they came out kind of broke even during that period. Now the venture capital guys who got in and the inventors did very well during those processes. So I think for Battelle, we've learned a lot in that process, and I've been studying that. And I think it means, you know, we're going to do a little bit of maybe VC startup stuff, but we're going to look more for partners, or we can look for people that know how to do the things we don't know how to do. You know, if we're going to do something that hits a home and beauty area, we want to do it with L Brands because they know the market. They've got the metrics. They've got the distribution and marketing. If we're going to do something in the automotive sector, we want to do it with Ford or Honda. And I think that's where you're going to see us moving more of our attention. And we've done that along the way as well. So we're actually bringing in some talent to help us work those places out where we can take some of the things that we've learned in the government side and new technology technologies, and then how we can tweak them to be really relevant in the commercial market. And in most cases, we're going to try to do it through a partner that already knows that market, already understands it, and already has deep intimacy with those customers.
Great. Thanks. Thank you for your questions. Lou, welcome to Columbus. From one new Columbus person to the next, you're very much appreciated here. So
thank you, Frederic.
Yeah.
Thank you, speakers. I continue to be amazed at all of the innovation that gets coordinated at Battelle, and I think I speak on behalf of the community. I think we all are appreciative of the great jewel that we have there. So thank you for being here to share these insights. So let's again thank our sponsor, Deloitte. And our speaker, Lou Von Thayer and Frederic Bertley. And thanks to all of you for being here, and we look forward to seeing you at CMC next week.